Okay, so you got all this stuff. Got all this stuff in your Munkae truck package. And you gotta know, how can I put it together? It's easy. Oh, you got this too. First, you take the pivot cup and you put it in the base plate. Goes in. It's probably a pretty tight fit. But it goes in there. That's not in far enough. Gotta push it. Make sure you really get it in there. When you do, it should be pretty much flush on the base plate. Then you can put the kingpin in first. And I actually always recommend that you put the kingpin through the base plate. That way this smooth side touches this aluminum, not the coarse threads, because the threads, through use, will eat that hole away and make it really big and sloppy. Then you want to put a harder bushing, if you're running split durometers, on the bottom side. And you can take your hanger and just slip it right in there. It's going to be really tight because everything fits really good. So you're going to have to push on it. Once you got it in there, get that kingpin all the way up. Put the softer bushing on top. Put your washer and your nut. And make sure you tighten the nut down so that that nylon part, the threads are in it. If you notice, this truck has a T for tail. And this truck has an N for nose. That's how they get mounted on your board. If you have one of the last generations, it won't have the nose and tail, but what it will have are these little dots and arrows. There's just a regular arrow on this side, and there's no notch on the axle. This is the right hand thread side. And this side has a dot, an arrow, and a notch on the axle. The notch on the axle corresponds with the dot on the hanger, and it indicates that it's the left-hand thread axle. That means that this axle, lefty is tighty into the hanger. It doesn't mean that this nut is lefty tighty. These are all standard nuts. So you don't have to get something crazy and special. When you mount the trucks on a board, you want to make sure that the arrows, if you're looking at the underside of the board, point towards the tail end of the board. If you notice on the N, as it's sitting here, the arrows are pointing towards the sky. This would be the truck that would go on the front end of the board. And on the truck with the T, arrows are pointing down. So here's a good illustration. On the trucks that go on the nose or front of your board, these arrows are pointing up. On the side that goes on the tail of your board, these arrows are pointing down. Alright, now let's try and find some Munkae trucks in the wild. Make sure they're mounted correctly. Hello, sir. Do you have Munkae Trucks? Are they mounted correctly on your board?
Maybe.
May I inspect them and make sure that they are mounted correctly? Whoa. Whoa. You're an old connoisseur. You have purchased last generation of Munkae Trucks, which makes you old school, relatively speaking. Let's see. Oh my goodness. The arrow is pointing towards the rear end.
More improperly put together ones?
No. If you see here, this person's Carbon Evo is mounted correctly and it is used well. You can see that the arrows on the front truck point towards the back end of the board, which is over there. And the arrows on the back end of the board point towards the rear. This is a good find. What's this? Another set of Munkae Trucks. Oh, in purple this time with custom engraving. And on a Carbon Avenger. Look at that, mounted correctly. The arrows are pointing down towards the rear end of the board. And the dot, as I look at the underside of the board, is on the right hand side. He is using flat washers. He must like it loose. Look at how worn. That shows love. My goodness, even the rear trucks are mounted correctly with the arrows pointing towards the tail end of the board. But he has a terrible not flat washer. It's actually a cupped washer that's just turned over, but it still works because he didn't have another flat washer, I guess. Or he just doesn't care. Another board. It's a kill switch with monkeys. Oh man. The front end has the arrows pointing towards the rear. Let's see if the rear end has the same. It does. Awesome. Orange bushings and yellow stimulus wheels. He must be using this for free ride. I bet that's enjoyable.